Welcome to another edition of Authentic Leadership. Speaking for authentic leadership is a subject which I'm very passionate about. It's very close to my heart. And last time I posted a video, it was about authentic leader, the five phases, the five parts to it. And I've had feedback that 5 is too many, that 3 was probably sufficient. However, I trust that you can replay the video I did last time, and you'll be able to find that the 5 are actually quite useful. But generally 3 is the standard number. But this week I'm going to be revisiting the 5, not because I'm feeling awkward or deliberately facetious, but because I left you with some questions that I thought I was going to do last time, but I didn't get a chance to. So I'm going to ask you some questions about your own leadership style to see whether you fall within those 5 characteristics that I mentioned last week. So here's the first question. Regarding your purpose, what do you do that creates value for others? And you can only answer this for yourself. So this is like a self-reflection. What can you do that creates value for others? And secondly, again, related to purpose and passion, why do you do what you do? Why do you do what you do? And if your answer is, oh, well, that's for the money, or because I need to pay the rent, etc., then clearly it's not really related to purpose and passion. So give yourself some opportunity to reflect on that one. The second question was around values. He spoke about values and principles. So what are your 4 critical values? And really the 4 critical values for doing good work. I think that's really important. And what actions or decisions demonstrate your values. So what I'll do next is, well, I'll be sharing my screen with you today. But first of all, I just want to finish off these 5. But I thought this one particular one, this is the next one, is one that I really wanted to focus on. And that is, know if you have the heart for leadership. What do I mean by that? Well, it's to do with why should people be led by you, first of all, and how can you enable others to become successful? Because if you're coming from the heart, your focus is not on yourself, it's on others. So that's the one that I really want to focus on this week. I've called it authentic leadership, leading with the heart, and leading from a sense of courage, and they're linked. The relationships was another aspect from last time. Who do you hire? Your team members. Who do you hire? Who do you fire? Who do you cultivate? Who do you develop? Who do you promote? And regarding your customers and your partners, how do you choose them? And what lifetime value can you offer them? And finally, there was this element of self-discipline. All leaders have this strong, disciplined focus that enables them to get the job done. And it's the 5th aspect. So what are your weaknesses in regard to self-discipline? And what are your actions that will help to mitigate those weaknesses? In other words, what could you do to overcome those ones? For example, if communication is a weakness, start by meeting people and chatting with them. Take those opportunities to make that weakness become a strength. I've also had feedback about authentic leadership in regards to world leaders. And while I don't want to make any comment on present world leaders, they are very much in the spotlight. So you see them a lot. And one question I got asked is, so is Trump and Boris Johnson authentic leaders? Are they displaying authentic leadership? And from one perspective, you know, they are being authentic to themselves. They are who they are, and that's what they bring to work. However, my definition of authentic leadership is one where it is not a small a, authentic, but a large A. So it's a capital A. Authentic leadership is actually a style of leadership, and it's built on certain foundations. It's built on some pillars, which I will go into later, which will help you understand why I don't think Trump, Johnson I won't mention because he's a current leader, but I don't think what Trump is an example of authentic, big capital A, capital L, authentic leadership. Otherwise, you could just show up and be yourself. And if you're a nasty or violent person normally, then that's, you may be authentic, but you're not displaying the characteristics of authentic leadership. So I just wanted to clear that one up. So I'll share my screen with you, and we'll get into today, which we've started already with going over those questions that I want you to reflect on. I think once you get your head around those questions and the answers to those questions, you'll have an idea of whether you even aspire to be an authentic leader or not. So today's session is authentic leadership, lead with heart, lead with courage. And I've chosen that because heart and courage are very tightly linked. In fact, courage comes from the French word cœur, which is heart. So heart and courage are inextricably bound together. Here's the questions that I posed to you about purpose, values, heart, relationships, and self-discipline. And I'm going to be focusing on the heart aspect today. Do you have the heart for leadership? Well, have you ever heard having a head-to-head conversation? You probably, well, you might have done, but the chances are you're more likely to have heard about a heart-to-heart conversation, because it's what's important when the topic is important. You know, the words that you will say aren't enough. Those come from your head. Because we also need to have an open heart when we have those difficult discussions. So that often in organizations, having a heart-to-heart is what's important when the topic is difficult. For example, I came across an email conversation between two people who were not being too kind about their leader. And it was brought to my attention. The person, one of the people who was responsible for berating the leader in unkind terms, saw where the problem was and said that she would go and meet the leader and apologize. Now, probably you and I think that's a good idea, but the leader didn't. He thought, why should I have to go through this? Why should I be subjected to more, as he saw it? And his supervisor agreed as well. So in the end, there was no apology able to be given. There was no discussion about it. And I think that it's a bit strange when we talk about forgiveness, you know, when people don't even accept forgiveness, it's really hard. So owning up to your own mistakes, it was her fault in the first place, she was going to own up to it, but he wouldn't even countenance it. So it was a bit strange for me, because this was an organization that espouses servant leadership. You know, and doesn't that mean asking, not only asking for forgiveness, but also accepting forgiveness? And it comes down to what a gentleman described as having a tender heart and a tough skin. I think he said a tough hide. That really does encapsulate for me authentic leadership, having a tender heart and a tough hide. I think you need a tough hide in order to have a tender heart. If you're thin-skinned, you won't be able to have those heart-to-hearts. You won't be able to accept forgiveness. So courage, the courage to be a leader. Let's just have a look quickly at this diagram, the people versus the task focus. I want to come back to this and look at it in more detail, but talk around the idea that just because politicians and leading sportsmen are found ethically dubious or morally wanting, if they're the best that society's got to offer, then we don't need role models anymore. But I would say, no, I disagree. I think that we need role models even more because of what has come up and the awful things that are coming up through our so-called leaders in society. So within any organization, any workplace, you'll find that there are three types of manager or leader. And I want you to think about where you are on this spectrum. So we've got a task-focused leader, heavily task-focused, and we've also got on the other end of the spectrum, a heavily people-focused leader. But somewhere on there, on that continuum, you will be. I'm not going to suggest that you are one extreme or the other. It's like the question, are you an introvert or an extrovert? Well, even the person who created that, Carl Jung, said there is no such thing as an extreme introvert or an extreme extrovert. They'd be in the lunatic asylum if that were the case. So we're talking about somewhere in there. But if you're much more towards the task-focused end, then nothing is more important to you than goals, than targets, than the results that are achieved. People are, for this person, disposable. They're there as a resource in the pursuit of targets. And these people, towards the task end, are often very highly competitive. They're driven, they're cold, they're not well liked. They're often using their power, their leadership to exert coercion, even, to get things done. Now, if you're at the opposite end, if you're at the people-focused end of the spectrum, there you are heavily focused on people, because tasks are and results almost become a casualty of your focus on the well-being of others. You're often not respected fully because people frequently take advantage of your good nature. But that's the extreme. But in between there, you'll be somewhere. And the vast majority of people are in between task-focused and pure people-focused. So you may have a natural preference towards one, just as introverts and extroverts have a natural preference towards one side of the spectrum or the other. I want you to think about where you are. Where is your leadership focus at the moment? Where's your style at the moment? If you draw this out very quickly on a piece of paper and put a 1 at where you are, so you may be more task focused, maybe where the first person on the left is standing. That may be your natural tendency when things are okay. So you're over on the task side. Now, that's number 1. Number 2 is where would you like to be? Where would you actually like to be on that spectrum? And maybe, for argument's sake, you'd like to be in the middle. You know, the third person, right in the middle there, right on the top of the triangle. And so that's 1 is where you are. 2 is where you'd like to be. Now 3, the third position is put yourself where you are when you're under heavy stress, heavy time pressure, heavy pressure from above, lots of conflict going on, the worst type of thing. Where do you put yourself then? Now, for argument's sake, you might put yourself between the extreme task person and the 1 where you normally operate. So you might be halfway between the 2. And that's where you operate when you're under extreme stress. There's no right or wrong, by the way. It's purely a self-reflective tool. So what are you going to do to go back from 3 to 1, which is where you are? 3 is when you're under extreme stress. 1 is where you are. And then ideally, how do you get to position 2, which in your view is your ideal position to be in? So that's an interesting look at a people versus a task focus. But knowing where you are and what the implications and the consequences are is very important for you in terms of building up your self-awareness. And that this is something that many leaders just fail to grasp. So you're already 1 step ahead. Many people, interestingly enough, those who are results-oriented or task-focused, think that a leader is someone who has responsibility for the results to be achieved by a team or a group of followers. That's a primary definition of a leader to them. But I think personally that leadership, although it encompasses achieving results, it also includes the personal power that leaders have over others, by which I mean the influence and the degree to which other people look up to them. There is a power in that, regardless of what hat they're wearing, regardless of their title, regardless of whether they're officially leaders or managers. And if you look at Twitter, that's a very good example of this, because we follow people we consider to be our role models because they have something useful or interesting to say to us. But subsequently, if we decide that they don't, or they let us down as their role models, we no longer follow them. We just simply stop. So the question becomes, we're thinking about authentic leadership. What do our followers want? What do they want? I believe that although senior leaders get paid to set strategic goals and influence operational objectives settings, it's very easy for them to misunderstand what their followers really want and need from them. You know, especially if you're a leader who spent most of his time in meetings, you're not in touch with people. But leaders pay attention to what followers want, and authentic leaders, please, you'll need to pay attention if you want to be an authentic leader. There are, this is a great quote from Theodore Roosevelt, 26th president, because this is going to come into this next section. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's a very important quote. People don't know, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So the four things, here they are. This is what people, followers want from their leaders. They're not task focused, are they? They're not results driven either. They're not operational. They're not strategic. And they say less about what a leader does than about who he or she is in terms of their personal characteristics and their personal values. So the first thing that followers want from their leaders is trust. They want to be able to trust them, to believe that what they say is true. This is gold for you as a authentic leader, as an aspiring authentic leader, or somebody who wants to improve their authentic leadership, to know this. The second thing that they want is for a leader to be compassionate, to have empathy, and to care about their well-being. And leaders would be well advised to remember that previous quote that I showed you from Thomas Roosevelt, 26th president of the United States. People don't care how much you know until they care how much, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's actually a bit of a tongue twister in itself, but there's a lot of truth in that. And that hangs on the concept of empathy. And the third thing that followers want from their leaders, that they say they want, is that they want stability. They want, this is something that I believe leaders often overlook. They simply don't realize this in their often relentless drive for change and improvements and performance improvements and financial savings. What followers want is stability. And the fourth thing that they want, as you can see from the diagram, is that they want to feel hopeful about the future. Something that's impossible without the first thing, trust, being present. So there they are. Those are the four things that followers want. So the question is then, what kind of leader can engender trust, compassion, if you like, stability, and hope? What leader isn't going to be so competitive that they believe the end justifies the means, or be so blinkered by greed that they're prepared to put profit before people, or become embroiled in a debacle? Many examples exist that shows a lack of ethical judgment and personal integrity. I have come to believe that the answer is a leader who practices authentic leadership. And a little sidebar to this is, if you look at Jim Collins's level 5 leader, I believe that's along similar lines. So a leader who embodies the very best of leadership, and more than any other quality, this is the essence of this part, has the courage to lead, is embodied in, well, the actual courage word is embodied in both its modern use, like physical courage, for example, and its original French meaning, which is coming from the heart. These leaders are authentic leaders, and they're driven by passion and purpose. So they combine that personal courage with ethical decision-making and deliver sustainable long-term results. So authentic leadership means much, much more than being genuine or true to yourself. You know, after all, you could argue that all leaders are being true to themselves, and that any leadership style is authentic, despite its good or bad qualities. And I put in there historical examples like Hitler, And then you need to, you know, that just brings to mind, now that cannot be authentic leadership. He had different powers, but that's not in the definition of authentic leadership, where you consider trust, empathy, hope, and stability. I don't think that fits in with there very easily. And the final thing I wanted to touch on today is the 3 pillars of authentic leadership, to help you understand how authentic leadership is built up. And if you pause for a moment to think about why leaders are not successful, why they actually fail, well, in every case, you'll find that they will have failed on one or more of these pillars of authentic leadership, the ones I'm showing to you right now. The first pillar is self-awareness. And get your head around this. You need to know yourself, your strengths and your weaknesses. You need to understand how other people perceive you. You need to be acutely aware of how your thoughts and emotions affect your language and your behaviors, and therefore the impact and the influence you have on others. You need to be able to articulate your core beliefs and your core values, and understand your personal boundaries and your intellectual, your emotional drivers. It's knowing who you are and what you value, basically. You're building a secure sense of self to provide you with an anchor for your decisions and your actions, not just in business, but through life. It requires the ability to, as you're making decisions, look at your own assumptions and question them. Are they the right things in this present moment when I'm dealing with this particular issue? And it also requires reflection after that moment has passed. You know, I've encountered people, leaders who lack even a basic level of self-awareness. They just fail to understand themselves and fail to understand those people that they're meant to lead and manage. Self-regulation is the next one I want to touch on, which is over on the right-hand side. It's the second pillar. It's closely connected with how well you know and understand yourself, the self-awareness one. It's all about self-management, you know, how you respond, your focus, your self-discipline. These are things that came up last time. Your ability to be in control of your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, as we've just mentioned, your levels of tolerance and patience, how you manage your energy, and your physical and mental and emotional toughness, your resilience. So physical and emotional courage sit within that pillar of self-regulation. And finally, the third pillar is ethics. Ethics as a concept and ethical action. Followers expect their leaders, because they watch them all the time, to be consistent and congruent. They judge leaders against their actions. And if they don't match, they stop following them and they stop trusting them, which is more devastating for the leader. And this is a crucial lesson for all leaders to learn, especially ones who are in the public eye, who don't realize this self-regulation comprises consistency and congruency between words and actions. So obviously within this pillar of ethics, a central pillar, there's personal integrity. It's all ethical decision-making. There's their core beliefs. There's all sorts of things in there. Honesty, trust, you know, openness, honor, fairness, taking into consideration how other people feel, and other people's needs. And I think if you look at those three, self-awareness, ethics, and self-regulation, you're, with the notable exception of self-regulation, you know, failure of self-regulation, such as drink driving or or bullying or inappropriate behavior. It's the failures in this particular pillar that seem to be in the media headlines so much. Not so much the other two, it's mainly in the pillar of self-regulation. And you'll notice above these pillars is relationships. And that's because they support and shelter under relationships. The quality of relationships that an authentic leader has, the healthy relationship he has with himself or herself, and the collaborative, mutually supportive relationship he has with others, is the crucial differentiator between a leader and an authentic leader. And there's a quote from Professor June Gruber from Yale University: the strongest predictor of happiness is not money or recognition through success or fame, it's having meaningful relationships. So just to wrap up, authentic leadership is the courage to lead. Courage to do what? Well, some of the things that people, on authentic leadership development workshops say is the courage to do what's right, regardless of the cost to you. Develop your own voice and be known for your ethical standpoint, and to be vulnerable, and not only be your authentic self, but your best self, your very best self. The paradox of authentic leadership is that by taking the ethical approach and engaging the hearts and minds of followers, it actually delivers better and more long-term sustainable results than other leadership approaches. And that's an obvious reason for all leaders to become authentic leaders, if only it were that easy, and it's not. It's a lifetime's challenge. Authenticity, bravery, and compassion, the ABC of authentic leadership. Remember those. Authentic leadership is just one leadership style, and it's obviously a personal choice. If you want to be not just yourself, but your very best self, then strive towards authentic leadership. If you need to know any more about authentic leadership, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me on this email. I'm interested in only talking to people who are keen to develop their own authentic leadership style. People who want to be their very best self, people who are prepared to invest time and effort and money in themselves and their relationships with the people around them. And if you really feel that you can have the courage to lead, that perhaps authentic leadership is for you. As a way of being rather than doing, I wholeheartedly recommend it. And I wish you the very best on your journey. This is me, Charlie Starrett, One World Speakers, Authentic Leadership.